Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Ava Mitchell, and before we dive into today's story, I have a quick question for you. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far our community reaches. If you are new here or haven't done so yet, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notification, and give this video a thumbs up. It helps the channel immensely, and trust me, you are not going to want to miss a single second of the story I'm about to share. Apologize to my sister right now or get out, my husband barked across the table. The dining room fell dead silent. The crystal chandelier hummed softly overhead, casting a harsh, artificial glow over the mahogany dining table, where 7 people sat frozen in mid-bite. Silverware hung suspended in the air. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, crossed her hands over her pearls, her eyes gleefully tracking the tension like a hawk watching a field mouse. Next to her sat my sister-in-law, Beatrice, the golden child, the perpetual victim, and the woman who had spent the last 4 years treating me like dirt on the bottom of her designer shoes. She was wiping away an invisible tear, leaning into her husband, David, who looked entirely miserable. Across from them sat my own brother, Nathan, and his wife, Sarah. Nathan was staring at his plate, uncomfortable as always whenever conflict erupted, while Sarah looked on with quiet, uneasy concern. And then there was my husband, Richard. His face was flushed crimson, his knuckles white where his hands gripped the edge of the mahogany table. "Did you hear me, Ava?" Richard snapped, his voice rising an octave. "You don't talk to Beatrice like that in my house. You're out of line, you're bitter, and I am sick of your jealousy. Apologize to my sister right now, or you can pack your bags and get out." I didn't blink. I didn't cry. For 6 long years, I had been the dutiful, soft-spoken wife. I had let Evelyn criticize my cooking, my clothes, and my family. I had let Beatrice orchestrate subtle humiliations at every holiday dinner, taking jabs at my career and my background while Richard nodded along, convincing himself his family was just playful. 10 minutes ago, Beatrice had done it again. Over a dinner I had spent 5 hours preparing, she made a snide, targeted remark about my late father's legacy, implying his small business had failed because of incompetence rather than illness. When I calmly corrected her with hard facts, Richard hadn't defended me. Instead, he snapped at me for ruining the mood and starting a fight. They thought I was backing down. They thought I was going to swallow my pride, choke out an apology, and slip back into the quiet, passive role they had sculpted for me. They had no idea that I had been planning this exact moment for 6 months. I didn't just have an apology prepared. I had an inventory of every dark, toxic secret holding this miserable family together. Slowly, deliberately, I laid my silk napkin down beside my plate. I stood up. The silence in the room stretched so thin you could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the foyer. I faced Beatrice. I looked her right in the eyes. Beatrice sneered, adjusting her collar, expecting me to grovel. I took a deep breath and delivered the single line that shattered 3 marriages, ours included. "I'll apologize to Beatrice the exact moment David finds out she's been sleeping with Nathan, and Richard admits he's been funneling his mother's inheritance into Sarah's private account." The air was violently sucked out of the room. For 3 terrifying seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The words hung in the air like a fog of pure poison. Then total chaos erupted. David's head snapped toward his wife, his face draining of all color. "What did she just say?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying blend of rage and confusion. Beatrice's smug smirk vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of sheer, unadulterated horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me, then scrambled to look at David. "David, no! She's lying! She's insane! She's just trying to hurt us because Richard yelled at her. Nathan?" Sarah gasped, her voice shrill as she whipped around to face my brother. Nathan was practically cowering in his seat, his eyes wide, sweat suddenly glistening on his forehead. "Nathan, look at me. Is this true?" Nathan couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at anyone. He just stared at his wine glass as if praying it would swallow him whole. That silence was his confession. Sarah let out a choked scream, slamming her napkin down and shoving her chair back so hard it turned over, crashing against the hardwood floor. Meanwhile, Richard had rocketed out of his chair skittering backward. "Ava, shut your mouth," he roared, lunging around the table toward me. "Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, don't I?" I said, my voice steady, cool, and smooth as silk. I didn't flinch as he approached. I simply reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick leather-bound folder I had kept hidden until this very second. I tossed it onto the center of the table, right between the roast beef and the silver candelabra. Page 3 has the bank statements, Richard, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Every monthly transfer from your mother's trust into Sarah's offshore account over the last 2 years. Page 7 has the hotel receipts from Nathan and Beatrice's weekend getaways in Chicago. And page 12 has the text messages. Evelyn let out a faint, gurgling gasp and clutched her throat, her precious pearls scattering as her hand trembled. My money? She squeaked, her gaze darting from Richard to Sarah. Richard, what is she talking about? My money? David didn't wait. He snatched the folder off the table, his fingers ripping through the pages. Beatrice tried to grab it from him, crying out, David, don't look at that! Please don't look! David shoved her arm away with a harsh, gut-wrenching bark. As his eyes scanned the printed text messages and time-stamped photos, the look of betrayal on his face morphed into pure hatred. He looked up at Nathan, who was already edging toward the dining room exit. You bastard, David breathed, his voice dangerously low. Before anyone could stop him, David hurled himself across the table, knocking over wine glasses and china, lunging straight for my brother's throat. Nathan shrieked, ducking as David's fist swung wildly through the air, shattering a crystal wine decanter into 1,000 sparkling shards. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth like fresh blood. Nathan scrambled backward, knocking over his own chair and scrambling toward the foyer on his hands and knees. David lunged after him, roaring in raw, unfiltered rage. David, stop, please! Beatrice shrieked, rushing after them, her manicured nails digging into David's jacket as she tried to pull him back. David didn't even look at her. He simply threw his elbow backward, catching her on the shoulder and sending her sprawling onto the rug, sobbing hysterically. Meanwhile, the second explosion was tearing apart the other side of the room. Sarah was standing frozen over the opened folder, her eyes wide as she stared at the bank statements printed in black and white. Offshore accounts? She whispered, her voice dangerously calm as she looked up at my husband. Richard. You told me you were taking care of my father's medical bills through a private loan. You told me it was clean. It was clean. Richard pleaded, reaching out for her hands, completely ignoring me now. Sarah, listen to me. My mother was never going to use that money. She was hoarding it while you were drowning in debt. I did it to protect you. You stole from your own mother? Evelyn screamed, her voice reaching a pitch I didn't know the human vocal cords could produce. She tottered to her feet, her hand shaking as she pointed a withered finger at Richard. My trust fund? You stole my late husband's legacy for her? Mother, shut up for 1 second, Richard barked, losing his composure completely. Don't you dare talk to her like that. Sarah yelled, stepping between Richard and Evelyn, her face twisted in utter disgust. You lied to me, Richard. You manipulated me. You made me complicit in a federal crime. She slapped him, a sharp cracking sound that echoed through the high-ceilinged room. Richard stumbled back, clutching his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. For 6 years, he had been the undisputed puppet master of this family, controlling everyone through guilt, money, and subtle emotional abuse. Now, his entire kingdom was burning to the ground in front of him, ignited by a single flame I had lit. I stood back near the mahogany sideboard, watching the chaos unfold with a quiet, satisfying calm. I poured myself a fresh glass of sparkling water, took a slow sip, and let the madness wash over me. In the foyer, the sound of slamming wood and groaning drywall signaled that David had cornered Nathan. Screams echoed off the marble tiles as Beatrice's frantic pleas mixed with the brutal thud of physical violent retribution. Richard finally turned his head toward me. The panic in his eyes was instantly replaced by an ugly, venomous hatred. He took 3 long strides toward me, pointing a finger directly at my face. You did this, he spat, his voice shaking with fury. You psychotic, malicious bitch! You came into my home, sat at my table, and ruined my family. You set this whole thing up. I didn't set anything up, Richard, I replied softly, my tone smooth and entirely devoid of fear. I didn't force Beatrice into Nathan's bed. I didn't force you to forge your mother's signature on those offshore wire transfers. I didn't force Sarah to accept money she never bothered to trace. I just stopped keeping your dirty little secrets. You think you're clever? Richard sneered, stepping closer, his chest heaving. You think you're going to walk away from this clean? You signed a prenuptial agreement, Ava. You get nothing. Not a single cent of my money, not this house, nothing. You're going to end up penniless on the street, just like your pathetic father. I couldn't help it. A small, genuine smile broke across my face. It was the first real smile I had worn in this house in years. Oh, Richard, I murmured, leaning in slightly. Did you really think I didn't read Section 14B of our prenup? Richard froze. The color instantly drained from his face for the second time that night. Infidelity and financial fraud render the entire agreement null and void, I whispered, taking a step closer to him so only he could hear me over the lingering screams in the hall. And guess what? Since I'm the one who uncovered the embezzlement of your mother's trust, the forensic accountants I hired 3 weeks ago have already submitted the evidence to the district attorney's office. As of 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, all your domestic assets are frozen. Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. You went to the authorities? I had to, I said innocently, tilting my head. After all, as your wife, I wouldn't want to be considered an accomplice, would I? Behind him, Evelyn collapsed back into her chair, clutching her chest and gasping for air as the reality of her ruined finances set in. Sarah was already grabbing her coat and purse, glaring at Richard with pure hatred, before walking straight out the front door, leaving the ring he had secretly bought her sitting on the console table. Out in the hallway, the heavy front door slammed shut. A moment later, the sound of David's truck engine roared to life, tires screeching down the driveway as he left Beatrice sobbing on the cold marble floor of the foyer, completely alone. 3 marriages, built on lies, greed, and arrogance, destroyed in less than 10 minutes. I set my glass of water down on the table, picked up my designer trench coat from the back of my chair, and slung my leather purse over my shoulder. Richard just stood there paralyzed, watching me as if I were a stranger he had never met before. In a way, I was. The meek, obedient Ava he thought he had trapped was gone forever. I walked past him toward the front door, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. As I stepped into the foyer, past Beatrice, who was curled in a ball crying on the rug, Richard called out to me one last time, his voice broken and desperate. Ava, wait, please. We can talk about this. I paused at the front door, turning back to glance at him over my shoulder. You told me to apologize or get out, Richard, I said softly, my hand resting on the brass door handle. I chose to get out. I stepped out into the crisp autumn night, pulling my trench coat tight around my shoulders as the front door clicked shut behind me. The cold air felt incredible against my skin, flushing away the stale heat of that toxic dining room. Behind me, the muffled sounds of shouting and sobbing slowly faded, replaced by the quiet rustle of fallen leaves drifting across the driveway. I didn't rush. I walked down the stone steps with measured, confident, deliberate steps. Parked at the curb was my sleek black sedan, not the family SUV Richard had bought to control where I went, but a vehicle I had quietly leased 3 months ago under my maiden name. As I unlocked the door and slid into the leather driver's seat, my phone buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out and looked at the illuminated screen. It was a text notification from my legal counsel. Filing complete. Frozen assets confirmed for 8 a.m. Excellent work, Ava. Rest well tonight. I smiled, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat and glanced in the rearview mirror. For 6 long years, I had allowed Richard and his family to make me feel small. I had let them rewrite my identity, turn my quiet nature into a weakness, and insult the memory of my father, a man who worked 40 years with honest hands to build a life for his family. They believed money bought immunity, and that arrogance was their ultimate undoing. Starting the engine, the quiet hum of the car filled the cabin. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught one last glimpse of the estate in my side mirror. The heavy oak front door swung open, and Richard staggered out onto the porch. His tie was undone, his hair disheveled, and his face pale in the ambient glow of the porch light. He looked frantic, looking left and right into the darkness, searching for me. Behind him, Beatrice was being helped out by Evelyn, both of them reduced to mere shadows of the smug aristocrats who had sat at my dinner table an hour ago. He caught the glint of my headlights as I reached the end of the street. For a brief second, our eyes locked through the glass. He threw his hands up in a desperate, silent plea, taking a step down the driveway as if he could somehow run after me. I didn't slow down. I tapped the turn signal, smoothly pulled onto the main boulevard, and left the wreckage of the Mitchell family firmly in my rearview mirror. 6 months later. The midday sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new high-rise office in downtown Chicago. The glass plate on my desk read Ava Mitchell, Principal Auditor. It hadn't been an easy half year, but it had been entirely mine. The fallout from that single dinner had swept through their lives like a hurricane. When the forensic audit report hit the district attorney's desk, the evidence was undeniable. Richard was charged with corporate embezzlement and grand larceny for draining his mother's trust fund through illegal offshore accounts. His firm dropped him within 48 hours to protect their reputation. Unable to post high bail after his assets were frozen, he was currently awaiting trial, facing a mandatory minimum sentence. Evelyn, forced to sell the sprawling family estate to cover the back taxes and legal fees Richard accrued in her name, was now living in a modest 2-bedroom condo, stripped of the wealth she used to lord over everyone around her. The marriages didn't survive the night. David filed for an immediate annulment from Beatrice, citing irreconcilable fraud and infidelity. He took everything they owned, leaving Beatrice with nothing but her reputation in tatters. She had tried reaching out to me twice through mutual acquaintances to beg for mercy, but I simply blocked the numbers. As for my brother Nathan, the betrayal cost him his home and his business. Sarah divorced him within 2 months, taking full custody of their shared assets. Nathan moved 2 states away, disgraced and isolated from the family he had helped destroy. He tried calling me on my father's anniversary, leaving a weeping voicemail about forgiveness. I deleted it without listening to the end. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They are meant to burn so you can see your way forward. My desk phone chimed, bringing me back to the present. I pressed the speaker button. Yes, Elena? Ms. Mitchell, your 2-hour PM consultation is here. My assistant's voice came through crisp and clear. It's a client dealing with a contested prenuptial agreement and hidden marital assets. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the cool, steady beat of my own heart. I was no longer the quiet woman sitting at the end of someone else's table, swallowing insults to keep a fragile peace. I had reclaimed my life, my name, and my power. Send them right in, Elena, I said softly, standing up to adjust my blazer. Tell them they're in very good hands. Thank you all so much for listening to today's story. It takes immense courage to walk away from toxicity, but sometimes burning down the wrong table is the only way to build your own. If you enjoyed this story and loved seeing justice served, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on all bell notifications so you never miss a new upload. Drop a comment down below, letting me know your thoughts on how Ava handled her revenge. Would you have done the same? I love reading your opinions, and I'll be in the comments section replying to as many of you as I can. Until next time, stay strong, stay safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye.